Let us now understand the objectives of government budget. Government budgeting can be understood under three different functions. So let me now tell you the three different functions. The first one is the allocation function. The other one, redistribution function. And the third one is stabilization function. Let me first explain the allocation function. Allocation function is otherwise the allocation of resources for economic activity. Now, this allocation of resources for economic activity should be at the optimum level. You know very well that the economic activities are undertaken by the private sector as well as the public sector. Ours is the mixed economy where both private and public sector exist. The main motive of private sector is profit maximization. And the public sector works for the welfare of the people. Certain activities are not taken by the private sectors due to huge investment and lack of profit, whereas the public sector they take care of the activities like education, medical facilities, etc. Even the government gives subsidies to poor people and food grains are provided at a nominal rate to the poor people. So this is how they satisfy the people. Whereas the private enterprises, they work for profit, and so whichever brings them profit, those undertakings are taken care by the private sector. So the objective of government budget is to reallocate the resources properly in such a way the people are not affected. The next function is the distribution function. Redistribution function. This function promotes equity. It aims at promoting equity. You all know that there's a big gap between rich and poor. There's a gap between rich and poor. The rich become richer and richer, and the poor become poorer. So, the government aims at reducing this gap. So, the government aims at reducing this gap between the rich and the poor. It uses the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy. So, the two ways that government uses the policy are through taxation and government spending. Now you know very well the taxation is a burden for the people. What government does here is it increases the tax on the income earners who earn high income, whereas those who earn less income they are exempted from paying tax. So this high income tax So higher tax on income and the tax on the goods which are used by the rich people. So what happens here? The money is withdrawn. It is withdrawn from the rich. When there is higher tax, the money is withdrawn from the rich, and this reduces the disposable income of the poor. Sorry, this the disposable income of the rich. So as the tax rate is high, the percentage of tax is high. This reduces the disposable income of the rich. Disposable income of the rich. And what happens? This money can be used by the government, and government can increase its spending. So government increases its spending on poor people, on goods used by the poor, and to give subsidies for the poor. So the government increases its spending, and so the disposable income of the poor increases. So the taxation, when it is imposed high on the rich income group, this decreases the disposable income of the rich, and at the same time, it increases the disposable income of the poor. So this is the way that redistribution function is performed by the government through the government budget, and the fiscal policy is adopted through taxation and government spending. The broad gap between rich and poor is narrowed. So it brings about equity in the distribution of income and wealth. The third function is the stabilization function. Stabilization function is nothing but bringing about economic stability. So when there is economic stability, it means there is no fluctuation in the economy, no economic fluctuation. Economic fluctuations brings about certain uncertainties in the economy. So economic fluctuations, these economic fluctuations, that is inflation and deflation, they create uncertainties. They create uncertainties in the economy. Hence, the government has to control these two fluctuations in such a way it brings about stability in the economy. So there should be economic stability such a way there is no inflationary gap as well as deflationary gap. So during inflation, when there is a situation of inflation, the government uses the fiscal policies, as I told you earlier, both fiscal policies, taxation, and government spending. So both fiscal policies are followed during instability. So during inflation, what happens? Already the money in circulation in the economy is high. So during that situation, during inflation, the tax rate would be high and the government spending would be low. So the tax would be high and government spending would be low during inflation. Whereas during deflation, the tax rate would be reduced and the government would spend more. It would increase its expenditure such that it could satisfy the poor people to the level possible. So this is how the economy comes back to stability. So this is called as stabilization function. So hope we have understood all the three main functions of government budget, that is allocation function, redistribution function and stabilization function. Apart from these three functions, government budget also aims at bringing about economic growth in the economy. So increasing the GDP. And then through redistribution function, it can reduce the problem of poverty. So reducing poverty, and by starting schemes, that is employment promotion schemes, like RLEGP or TRISM. So such schemes would remove unemployment problem. So that is also one of the objectives of government budget. So apart from these three functions, you can also understand the function like removal of poverty, reducing unemployment problem, and then economic growth by increasing the GDP level of the economy.